Extraordinary, isn't it, that we've spent the last 9 weeks talking about strategy and the importance of planning and how you should look at the marketplace and try to understand the opportunities and threats that it is facing. But that actually sometimes success and, for that matter, failure comes out of looking inside the organization, looking at what we're capable of doing, what are our core competencies and our skills and our resources. And that's the inside out view. And here we are, the university's just been closed, completely unexpected. I guess strategy, if there was a way of measuring it, must come down to what extent was it possible to predict what was happening outside, and for the university to prepare for that. And I can tell you that what they'd started doing is putting together a range of contingencies, which included training staff so that they could deliver online courses. Now, of course, we've been doing that for some time, haven't we? Because that's what these videos are all about. But also, as part of the response, what you should know is that the team here, the staff, the admin team, have all been meeting on a regular basis, working out what the main problems were and trying to deal with those so that we were able to say, well, what could we do better so that the customers, our students, are able to still get the best possible experience and that we can deliver something which makes them successful. So it's been interesting to be part of this sort of strategy process, because we have been looking at the outside world and making some predictions about what might happen, and we have been doing some preparation. We're now in a situation we're thinking, actually, that preparation wasn't enough and we could do even more. What could we do better? So hopefully you'll see over the next couple of days and weeks that we will be producing some solutions that will deliver successful outcomes for everybody. Okay, so just bear that in mind. We are living strategy at the moment. Okay, I'm not saying it's pleasant, but it is exciting. So bear with us and we'll try and get you through the strategy course. Of course, I'm still going to emphasize the fact that for next week, there's a multiple choice test, 44 questions in 44 minutes. You need to log on at the times you've been allocated. If you're a daytime student, that means it's at 1 o'clock. Between 1 o'clock and 1:15, you can start the test, and it's available through My Aberdeen. If you're the evening student, then you start the test at 5 o'clock, or between 5 o'clock and 5:15. You get 44 minutes, and then you have to save and submit, and you get your results back straight away. So it is the case that you can only attend those sessions at the time that you've been allocated. Okay, evening in the evening, 5 o'clock onwards. Daytime during the day, 1 o'clock onwards. Okay, so any questions about that, contact me directly by email. All right, good luck with that. So we're going to continue our preparation. And what we were talking about last week was this idea about global strategy. So clearly, the coronavirus is a global problem for which it needs a global solution. Is there a global solution? Are all the countries behaving the same way? Have they all tried to solve the problem the same way? Of course, the answer is no. They've all tried to do it in slightly different ways. In some cases, they've closed towns and cities. In some cases, they've closed football stadiums. I think in Scotland, they've decided not to shake hands now at the beginning of football games as a way of reducing the spread of the virus. And in other places, of course, they've closed down the airports or the cities, or in the case of Qatar, most of the GCC areas, they've closed down universities and large meeting areas. I hope we're all going to be safe. I hope we can all continue to work together. But let's work on global strategy then. What we talked about was this idea that global strategy comes in different forms, and they're called patterns of internationalization. So at one end of the scale, we have this idea of sheltered industries, and sheltered industries are normally industries that operate largely on a local basis or on a personal basis. So those are companies like hairdressers or opticians, because they normally service local populations. But that doesn't stop them from being global. And examples of that are Specsavers or Optical Express, which are major franchises throughout the world, where essentially the concept of the optician has been reproduced through franchise. And therefore it has become globalized. But essentially, it's only the delivery of that service is only local. So they're called sheltered. At the other end of the scale, we have maybe those are global companies who are companies like car industry, telecommunications industries, oil, because these are common products no matter where you are in the world. Petrol is petrol no matter where you are in the world, and the supply of petrol and the refining of petrol and the exploration of petrol is largely done by companies that operate pretty much in the same way anywhere in the world. And of course, the product that we get at the end of it is pretty much the same too. So these are global companies. And then there's multi-domestic companies, and these are companies maybe like uh, retailing or hotels, where they tend to be operating in many different marketplaces, but they tend to be quite specific. So they'll operate in one way in the UK, they'll operate in another way in Europe, they'll operate in a different way in China, and therefore they're essentially companies that are operating in different ways in different countries. And then finally, there are those ideas which are trading industries, and these are trading industries which are often um, companies that have specialist expertise, which is only normally traded in a certain, is only normally generated, that the value, the product, the output is only normally generated in one particular country. And maybe aerospace is a good example of that. Um, but of course, the aerospace industry sells planes all over the world. So they're effectively trading the output of their excellence all over the world. Okay. So in this sense, we have uh, business strategy, we have corporate strategy, and then we have global strategy. And these are levels of strategy that help us to understand that as a business operating on its own, we clearly have some choices as we grow around the world. Do we want to reproduce ourselves in the same way around the world? Do we want to be in full control of our business around the world and therefore we're wholly owned? Or do we want to, for example, franchise? How quickly do we want to grow? Um, and what sort of value proposition do we need? So there are some challenges both for businesses, for corporations in operating globally. So we know that from a strategy point of view, we have the outside in view, what's going on in the world. Can we see it all? Can we be sure what's happening around the world? And therefore, can we make the right choices from a global point of view? We have that idea that we can look at ourselves, the inside out view. What are we good at? What could we do? What could we produce? But in the case of global strategy, there's a third element, and that is, what about the countries in which we are going to be operating, manufacturing, producing, or even having our head offices? Do they have the skills needed to do the job that we need them to do in order that our value can be communicated through the supply chain? Do they have actually the hierarchy of distribution, for example, that enables us to get our product to the customer in the way that has traditionally generated the value and satisfaction? Okay, so there is this issue about this national environment. Sometimes this is reinforced by this concept of comparative advantage. So we know that competitive advantage is the generation of, or the activities that generate sustainable profits. For comparative advantage, we're talking about some countries simply have more, they have surpluses, they have things which give them value because of their geography. An example of that, of course, is Qatar, with the oil and gas reserves that you have. It gives you a comparative advantage over the many countries of the world that have to buy in oil and gas. And therefore, you have this surplus of supply significantly greater than other countries, which allows you to then say, how can we use that to our advantage? All right. And one of the benefits of having this supply, of course, is it allows you to attract some of the best people, the most talented people from around the world to work in the industries that you are interested in and to pay them the sorts of salaries that attract them away from the industries in their own parts of the world. Yeah. And this idea of local differences is very important from a global point of view. Okay, so we're going to jump a few slides and sort of jump ahead to this idea of the Porter's National Diamond. And what he was talking about was this concept that when we think about the industry structure, it was about the suppliers, the powers of suppliers and buyers, and the power of new entrants and substitutes, as well as the power of our competitors in the form of rivalry. When we talk about global strategy and global structure, he talked about four things. One of them was factor conditions, which are the skills and capabilities of people to actually deliver value in those industries. And an example is in Hollywood, you've got acting schools and actors and theatre classes and whatever. So you actually have a stream of excellent people who can take part and engage in that industry very, very quickly. In the same way, you have an element which is called demand. And of course, in Hollywood, there's a big demand for creativity. And therefore, if you happen to be a film production company, you're in demand all the time because they want your creativity. To be a film production company in Hollywood, of course, they also need supporting industries, which video, cutting, presentations, marketing, these sorts of things. So the third element of that diamond is related and supported industries, which enable you to get your product to the market and to be made in a valuable way. And then the final part is about strategy, structure, and rivalry. And this is an interesting one because you sort of think that, well, if there's too much competition, that might actually make your business more difficult. But what we seem to find is that there are clusters of competition which seem to work in a very competitive way, but in a positive way, so that the companies, as they compete, they innovate, and therefore they're driving value creation through innovation. So Porter's National Diamond of factor conditions, demand conditions, structure and strategy and rivalry, as well as the evidence of local related industries, is quite important. And it fits in nicely, doesn't it, with that idea of innovation of technology. There are complementary resources. So these two models actually are very similar in the sense that successful companies are only successful because of the complementary structures around them. Okay, so bear that in mind. All right, so from a parent's point of view, thinking about your children, and this is from a corporate point of view, thinking about your businesses, or from a global point of view, thinking about your businesses, the corporation has to decide who are the people that get the resources, and where should we locate those resources. Is it the best thing to relocate our businesses into other countries, and therefore we can deliver value in those countries because we have control and access to those marketplaces? Or is it sometimes better to locate our business in one central area, London, New York, Paris, Moscow, wherever, so that we can essentially keep control of the businesses and potentially reduce our costs or reduce our risks by centralizing control but distributing the value in providing those products. That's a really key part. As a parent, how do you manage your children? All right, so think about that. It's not easy, is it? Who is it that gets the most food, and who is it that gets all the resources, and which is the one that's growing? Because as a parent, particularly in the business sense, competitive advantage comes from growth and sustainable growth. So one of the issues that we might think about as a parent in a global sense is, where are the countries that have comparative advantages that would enable us to maximize our income generation or our profitability? Yeah. Who are the companies that through a change or manipulation or through investment could take advantage of those geographical differences, and what sort of geographical differences do we need to accommodate, right? So Porter's Diamond is very important because it makes us think about where should we be investing our resources, where are the opportunities from a national point of view. Okay, so just a couple more slides I want to cover. The first one is this idea about alternative modes. You don't have to have a direct investment, and direct investments are things like fully owned subsidiaries where you set up your business in another country. Yeah? You could, for example, have an indirect investment, which is a form of transaction, which is where you do business with other countries by shipping things out. So you send things by plane or by airport or by road to their destinations. Now that's clearly the least risky thing, but it's also the one that gives you the least revenue. Okay. Having said that, if there's an embargo, that can be a real problem. If you're not located in a country, then you simply can't trade with them if there's an embargo. So these things are all important considerations. And thinking about the situation we have at the moment with the spread of the coronavirus, when you close the ports, when you close the airports, actually trade stops. And there's been a massive downturn in the economy as a consequence of people closing their ports. Companies are still making things, but they can't get them shipped to their customers, which means they can't invoice them, which means they can't take in any income. So think about the different ways in which you might, as a parent, grow your business, either by divesting yourself of less successful children, your businesses, or by investing more into those businesses who could be better, for example, if they changed the way that they operated internationally. Okay, so that's a really important point. How can we determine what a good success is? All right. So I'm just going to take you onto a model that we didn't really spend any time talking about in the lecture, and that is this cage model. And the cage model essentially says that when we go to another country, the fact is it's different. We know that, don't we? And different countries operate in completely different ways, and we need to be aware of those things. And there are four aspects that Gurwamar talks about, and it's called the cage model. Firstly, there's cultural difference. If we're going to operate our products and our services in another country where there is significant cultural difference, they do things differently, then probably we need to do things differently too. Yeah. In the case of IKEA, one of their problems was they took the view they were Swedish, they were unique, and this is how we are. Let's do it our way. And actually, it wasn't very successful because doing it our way didn't really resonate with many of the marketplaces in which they went because there was too great a cultural difference. So if there's going to be a cultural difference, one way of dealing with those sorts of things is to make sure that your business is located physically in the countries in which you're operating, because then you can adapt and be more sensitive to cultural difference. The second aspect of the cage model is this idea about administrative or political differences. Now, in some cases, the political systems are exactly the same as in your own country. There's free speech, there is freedom of choice, there's a constant change between political parties, and that often means an instability in things like the taxation system, but a stability in terms of democracy. And that is a problem because if you happen to be a business and you're trying to make money, you need to know how much you're going to get taxed, and therefore you may need to decide where do you locate. Amazon is a great example of this. Its head office is based in Ireland, and Ireland have very low business taxes. Now, virtually all the business that Ireland is doing, that Amazon does in Europe, is not in Ireland. It's mostly in places like France and Germany and the UK. But Ireland doesn't pay taxes to France, Germany, or the UK. So those governments are very angry that all the business is being done in their countries, but they're not getting any of the taxes that correspond to that. Okay, so that issue about administration is important, particularly because of tax. The third issue about is geographical difference. And the simple fact is that if you have to ship things across the world physically, there's a cost to that. And the closer you are, the easier it is to ship. The further you are away, the more expensive it is to ship and the longer course it takes to get there. And therefore, is it better in that situation to physically locate in a country where you would otherwise be paying high export costs or transportation costs? And then there's a final thing, and that's to do with economic distance. Marketplaces that are rapidly growing are clearly very, very attractive, okay, but they may not be very developed. So economically, taking money, invoicing, getting paid, things like credit, sometimes are not particularly well developed, and consequently might result in what seems like a high return not being achieved. So there is a difference between the culture, the way that countries administer business, the way that they are geographically located, and the economic ways in which businesses operate. And for that reason, in choosing to go global, consider those four alternatives. Okay, I guess one final thing, and we're talking about parents and subsidiaries quite a lot, is that how do you structure yourself so that your children behave well? Okay, so that's a really important question to try to think about. If you can structure yourself in such a way that your children behave and they perform well, then you have been a successful parent. So ask yourself that question. What do you need to do to structure your family so that your children behave and they look after you in your old age? And with that thought, I'm going to leave you for what was week 8, and I'll be shortly joining you again for week 9 and then week 10 as we start to deliver our stuff through this online medium. I hope you're enjoying the course. It is a very difficult course, but I'm really pleased with the level of engagement that there's been over the last 8 or 9 weeks. I'm looking forward to seeing you perform next week online. And I think you should be confident that if you've worked hard, you've read the book and you've had a go, you will do very well. And I look forward to seeing that success. All right, so for now, that's week 8 done. Some interesting topics to think about. Definitely think about parent and subsidiaries. Definitely think about corporate versus business versus global. Good ideas to start preparing model answers for. Okay, good luck. Hope things are going well for you. Be safe. Speak soon. Bye.